Hey everyone, welcome to Dance Colleges and Careers, brought to you by InstaDance. Professional training to dynamically style your technique, stage presence, and confidence. My name is Brittany Noltzmeyer, and I'll be your guide to helping you find the perfect college for you. Dance Colleges and Careers is here to provide you with information about different colleges, what to expect, and how to find the right college for your dance style. Go to instadancecoach.com with any further questions and follow me on social media at instadancecoach, InstaDanceCoach. Let's hit it. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Dance Colleges and Careers. Today, we have a special guest. His name is Max Vasapoli. He is a graduate and former staff member of the Brind School of Theater Arts at the University of the Arts, and he currently serves as an academic advisor for high school programs at the University of Pennsylvania, which is what we're going to talk about today. Hey, Max, how are you doing?
Good. How are you? Thank you so much for having me.
So Max is an experienced adjudicator and educator. He's entering his 8th competition season, having adjudicated across the U.S. and Canada. Max also adjudicated season 8 finale of Life of Dance Moms, Heyo, and he consulted the Wilma Theatre's production of Pulitzer Prize-finalist, Dance Nation. He's currently on the roster of Impact Dance Adjudicators and regularly contributes to their blog and podcast. So welcome to our show as well, Max.
Thank you so much.
Max also worked alongside of Cirque du Soleil's international tour, and he's also been a guest speaker at many schools and theater groups. So let's get to it, Max. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm good. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I grew up doing the arts and theater and dance and ended up going to the University of the Arts, and I studied at the Brind School. I was there. I got my BFA in musical theater. And then I took the usual route and kind of worked and taught while I was in school, and then continued that when I finished school. So I knew education was something I really, really wanted to have in my life alongside performing. And I'm very lucky that that's been able to happen. I'm sure a lot of other people have felt that way too on your show and beyond, who are teachers. But I ended up kind of parlaying that into a full-time position at the University of the Arts. When I began, I was the assistant to the director there at the School of Theater for about 4 years. So everything from welcoming new students to helping people graduate, and really acting as an advisor in that role. And currently that's what I do at UPenn, which is just around the corner from UArts here in West Philadelphia. Obviously a very different crowd, definitely STEM-based, people who are interested much more in math and sciences rather than the art. The advisor role still remains the same, really helping people through their coursework, making sure they get good grades and are able to continue on with us.
Great. So as an advisor at UPenn, even though it varies slightly from the theatrical world, it's still the same academically, right? So what are some of the main things you help students get through?
That's a great point. Yeah, of course, advisors are going to have very similar roles regardless of where you are. And we were just talking a little bit before this. I think a lot of students don't realize they're going to have someone that helps walk them through this process, what classes to take, what happens if you do fail a class, what happens if you have to repeat, if you want to take an internship on, if you want to take a class over the summer. Those are all very similar things that we see regardless of what you're studying, right? And then also if something happens and you want to change to pass-fail grading, or you didn't maintain a certain grade level, what happens then? Really working with students on their behalf to make sure that they get their education as they want it. I think too, really looking and planning, are there elective credits that you might want to use? Is there something you're interested in studying without having a formalized major or minor around it? I think exactly like you said, that's true of anyone who's a student. So there's a lot of similarities.
Diving a little bit here into the arts. I've heard sometimes advisors can either say like, maybe you get 2 years into school and then this is going to be a real downer. You get 2 years into school and they can start to advise you maybe towards a different major, or maybe like, hey, this might not work for your life because you're not really following this path that we thought you were going to. Is that a position that you ever have to be in? I feel like when that happens, students just, feel that knife to the heart. But you're an advisor for a reason. I guess I've seen people totally break down from that and other people thrive from that.
Absolutely. That's actually a great way of putting it, because some people, students especially, by the time they are a junior, let's say, that's a great example. They've been through enough of this coursework that they're seeing this is something I love, or this is not what I expected, or after school, I'm not sure how this will work particularly, or an injury. Sometimes an injury happens and you have to take off and you have to figure out what you're going to do for a year while you heal. I think that's probably more so what we see a lot of in the arts, or you get a tour and you come back to school or things like that.
Yeah.
I think you're right alongside saying, what do you do in those situations? And ultimately it's the student. It's the student who's putting in their energy, time, money, whatever investment that they're putting in. So ultimately it's up to them to choose what they want to do. I think it's our role as advisors, especially in those kind of more scary moments or troubling moments that all students will have. There are many paths to the same goal, right? Even if you didn't complete course of study this year, you could come back, you could take a leave of absence, you can transfer. And I think that's a lot of people don't realize that all of those options are available to you. And sometimes it's just based on credits. You don't pass something, and so you're not going to get a minor, let's say, or you just want to take something outside of your major and you want to move towards it. It really moves you towards something completely different. So that's right too. It's always up to the student and what they want to do, unless it's an emergency situation. But I think don't ever think that you can't catch up too. That's the other portion. I feel like a lot of people are saying, I'm 2 years into it, I have to complete it, otherwise I won't have anything. School is on your own terms. You get to choose when you want to finish at college, especially. And there's so many ways to the same path that sometimes we forget that you don't have to go straight through. There's a lot of people who don't go straight through and they choose something else, or they come back to it, or they transfer to a completely different program and they love it just as much. So be open to that as a student too. This is the first time you get to choose where you want to go.
Very cool. Yeah. Okay. That's a good way to put it, because I feel like sometimes being advised that way, you think that's the only option, but it really is ultimately up to the student, and you are a growing adult to make those decisions. And I really like what you said, that there are different paths to the same goal.
And I think in the next few years, we'll see a lot of people who start out in like an associate's program or community college, especially in the next few years. A lot of people have been displaced by the pandemic. So, studying dance right now isn't maybe a great idea for every single person. Some people are too far along, or they don't want to stop their education. But certainly I think we'll see a lot of people who go from an associate's program into a BFA or a BA program and go upwards from there. You can go into a master's degree program from there. But I think we'll see a lot of people making their own amalgamations of their way to a degree in the next few years.
Yeah. Okay. So looking at the next freshman coming in, so we're looking at year 2021. Do you have any recommendations? Like, where do you see students are most successful? You're up in the Northeast. So I don't know, I guess, would you encourage people to really take those academics now, continue to dance at their old studios, or find places that are still open to be active?
You are saying all the right things. Yes, I think we'll see that. I think we will see people who are, and that's maybe one of the tips I can give for students who are looking ahead. If you're a current senior, you're taking a gap year, you're doing whatever you can this year into next, is to be mindful of that everyone is going to be going through that. There's going to be a lot more kind of options and gap year programming than we've seen in the past. But I think one of the things you can be prepared for is, if you're not in school right now, but you want to work towards this, is continue your training. Ask around, ask other people at your studio, whether they're alumni, whether they're people who have taught there. Where did you go to school? What did you like about it? Did you have any injuries while you're there? Did you get set off track in any way? Because sometimes people will have really great insight into, I had this injury and it sidelined me, but I found this other thing and I'm super happy with that. Or, I didn't like this program and I transferred and I loved it. So I would say start with your community and see what options are within that. And then I think the other thing is, don't stop. Try to find something to keep you active, whether it's TAing at your local studio or your home studio or community college, even just a few online credits. Because when you get to a full program, having those liberal arts classes will really help you, I think, especially with time management. You have to realize that a lot of this coursework is not just in class, but there's rehearsals, there's auditions you may want to do, there's an opportunity outside the city, let's say, that you want to go pursue. You want to free up your time a little bit if you can by getting some of the liberal arts classes out of the way. That way you're taking those studio courses actually in session at a BA, BFA program. It'll save you some time, open up a little bit of free time for you, and maybe even get you some elective credits somewhere too.
If you're someone interested in like a conservatory program, like was U of Arts a conservatory when you went there? Is it still a conservatory?
Very much so. Not very much so, and then not very much so, to answer your questions. When I went, there was a class of 20 musical theater students, and now there's around 50. So you move through with that cohort, but you're not only with that cohort.
What about someone who might see themselves going more towards a conservatory program, that idea of get your liberal arts classes out of the way, I'm not sure exactly how those transfer to a liberal arts school versus a conservatory school. Would that be worth it? Could they see themselves wasting time? I mean, education is never a waste of time, in my opinion, but
of course,
wasting money or not towards their specific goal they think they're looking for.
That's a great question. And I think if you're already, let's say you're deferred from a school for until a year or 2 years, you can go and ask them, especially as a deferred student, an admitted student even, and say, hey, I'm interested in taking a couple classes at my local community college over the summer. What might transfer? What would be a good usage of my time? And if they have a good advisor, whether they're inside to you or even just your program director, they'll let you know. But most things will transfer if you get a solid grade, if you've already kind of done the check work on both ends. Am I getting this class from an accredited institution? Am I bringing it into an accredited institution? And as long as you do strong enough, it's most likely that you will be able to. But I think one of the steps you should definitely take if you're looking for and paying for college credits, whether it be at a community college, what have you, is to make sure it will transfer in. And some very general coursework will, if it's just a class about on the 20th century or writing for film and television, or something that's a little bit more general, it could definitely fulfill some of these courses and some of these requirements way more than like ballet 1, ballet 2,
right.
studio 1. You want to go towards those more generalized things, and it'll free up time for yourself as well, that you'll be able to know that, okay, I have my paper due and I can still go do these other things. But typically most schools want those transfer credits. They want to help you out. Unless you've done poorly, or it's not accredited institution, or you used dual enrollment, will be a very popular thing in the next few years for high school seniors and juniors to take classes while they're applying to college. Sometimes you can't use those because they've been used for your high school diploma, things like that. There's a little bit of gray area, but the major thing here is to check with your program, check with your advisor before you go and get these classes, get signed up in these classes over the summer or something. And then, you want to make sure that they transfer before you.
In my high school, I did all those dual enrollment classes. It was great. Got a whole bunch out of the way and took calculus. And then I got to college and all my other things transferred as they were supposed to. And calculus was counted as an elect. All that sweat and tears in calc for an elective when I could have been taking yoga.
Right, exactly. And you never know how it'll break down in your overall degree pursuit. You won't know how it may or may not help you, or how the director or the advisor will allocate those. So typically when you applied and got in and decided to matriculate to your program, they look at what you've taken already, and they'll say, we'll transfer this here, we'll transfer this there. And then they'll make your schedule around that. So we can see, like myself, I got out of the first half of first year writing 1. So I was in first year writing 2. So it didn't really, as a freshman entering the program. So I was a little bit ahead of people, but it didn't help me graduate any faster. It just helped me, like you were saying, a little bit of elective credits or credits here and there. But certainly they probably had a pretty small requirement of math specific courses.
Yeah.
So they were just like, oh, this is extra for you. Something like that.
Yeah, we had to take a lot more history than math. Okay, so I would love to talk about transferring. I feel it can be very terrifying to transfer because you go to a college, you have your whole heart and mind set on that, and that's your future for the next 4 years, for the rest of your life, really. If you're there and you decide this isn't right for you, how much is that going to set you back? Is it a big mistake to try to transfer, or I guess how much further do you think it could set you back?
I think at most maybe a year, depending on if you were switching from, I will use a student example without saying their name. We had a student at UArts who went from the dance program to the acting program because of an injury. And that did set them back about a year, just because you're making up those studio courses that you didn't take as let's say a dance major or whatever major you were before. I think what's a little bit more kind of pressing and what might be a more difficult sell is the timeline, because once you enter in this cycle of applications, that means you're going to be looked at with current seniors. So you're going to have to apply once you get to school. If you're looking for the next year to transfer, you have to know pretty quickly. So that's tough to say because a lot of people want to test it out or they think it's a great fit except for this one or two thing. It won't set you back, hopefully, if you've made a good partnership with the school you're hoping to go to. Here's what I've already completed. And they may ask you that in your interview or your audition. What have you already completed? What didn't you like? Or what are you hoping to get out of this program? So I would say have an answer for that. And an honest one too. It's okay if you're honest. I don't like this program. It wasn't for me. I'm in the city and I want to be in the country. Whatever it is, it's okay to be really honest about that. I think that shows your own sense of self-reflection, that you've taken some time. This is a big decision to make. Hopefully it's not life-altering, but it is educational altering, right? You spend some time and energy. To answer your question most succinctly, I think some programs have required courses you must take through them. You cannot take anything in or transfer anything in. And that might like music for dancers, physiology, things like that are very specific to a school or a program. And so some of those you may not be able to, you might have to retake those or take them again. And what's negative in this sense is that a lot of dance programs, musical theater programs, performing arts programs only have a few sections of something. So you might be a junior by credit, but you have to take the sophomore class because it's only run, there's only one section of it run. So be mindful of that you may have to play around a little bit with levels, or, everyone's taking the sophomore practicum class and I'm a junior, but I'm taking that class as well at the same time. So be prepared for that, but hopefully it's not life altering, right? Hopefully you've made the right decision. And I think on the other hand, most colleges will want to help you out if you're a transfer. They want that to be seamless as possible. They're not going to start you from the way beginning again. They know that you're working on this experience, and especially in dance, that you've been working up, in musical theater, that you're working up your strength, you're working up your knowledge and your musicality. They don't want to stop and have you restart again. So most places will work with you to make sure your transfer credits move over. And most likely you'll be able to stay at your class rank as well. So if you're a junior, you'll continue in your junior year, et cetera. Okay.
So if a student comes to you and they talk about wanting to switch schools, try to find every last bit of, are you sure? Are you sure? Are you sure? Or is it like you can tell if the student's made up their mind? Like, do you advise them away from it? Or is it, I guess, case by case basis?
I think sometimes it's useful to have a conversation about really hard set logistic. I want to perform more and there's no chance of that here. What can I do? Well, maybe you could make your own group. Maybe you could go join this group, or there's, professional opportunities here and there.
Right.
So start that first. And I think most of the time I give students a lot of credit because they have done this work. It's not easy for them to say I want to change. I want to do this. If they're set on it, there's usually something major, not just, I didn't like it. It's no, this is not for me. I don't want to stay here. And that does a disservice to the student and the teacher and myself as well. If I tell you to stick it out and hope for the best, if you don't like it, that's up to you. And you know what you want out of your education way more than I do. And there's a lot of options within that. But I think to answer your question, I always listen to what the student has to say first. And I might say, here's a couple options, or I've seen other students do this. That's not meant to change their mind. It's meant to just open up the conversation. There's some other options here. If these are the few things, maybe 5 or 6 things that you're hesitant about, here's a few answers to them. But ultimately, it's up to the student. They may also just love this other program, or the program has something very specific in a pedagogy class or something that they're really into and they really want to follow that, or they're ready to move somewhere else, something like that, or financially, and that kind of thing too. I think finances can definitely play a part in transferring or finding another program and stuff like that. I can't tell you to take out more loans or try to, that's not my role. And I don't want that to be my role. If you lost your academic, let's say you got a scholarship and you lost the scholarship for whatever reason, that is a big deterrent for a lot of people. Right. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you to come back to school knowing that it's not a good fit for your long-term mental health. So I think giving students the benefit of the doubt, I always do. I always say students know this. They have spent probably way more time thinking about their own transfer than I ever will. So they're ultimately the ones that if they want to do it, they're going to go do it. And if they don't, we've done the best that we can to help them and give them hopefully some solutions.
How about thoughts on if a performer gets a job while in college? They get a cruise ship, they book Disney or Broadway, but do they ever come to you and do you encourage them to finish an education while they take that job? Or is it okay, cut ties, go to your job, and if you want to go back to school, you figure it out? What are your thoughts on that?
It's a little bit of both. It depends. One of the major deciding factors is the length of time that you're out of school. So if you started a program and you take 5 years off to, exactly like you said, be on a national tour or just explore your other options, or you get a gig or whatever, If it's 5 years, you might have to reapply and you'd have to come back and re-audition. If it's a year, we can do a leave of absence, which is basically like putting a pause on your degree pursuit. And we say, see you in a year, hopefully, something comes of it and we'll see you. And if not, we understand. So that's probably the first thing for a student to say, like, I want to take a leave of absence. I want to continue this or not. I think if it was like a highly specialized program or something that you don't think you can get back into, or, if there's certain kind of contractual obligations to your acceptance, you may have to stick it out or come back. But for most students, I think the first thing is the length of time. If it's a week, 2 weeks that you might need to be away, you can figure that out with your teachers. But if it's a year, 2 years, you may want to take a leave of absence. And I think coming back to answer your question, a lot of people, and I think people who work in the arts end up taking on a lot of gigs once they come back off of something like that,
sure,
to make up for the time lost and just before the next thing happens. And typically most conservatories are going to be a full-time experience. You're going to have to, be there for 9:30 ballet and you'll leave at 4 p.m. and you might have rehearsals at night. If you're really going to do a BFA, especially a BFA program where it is very rigorous, you may not physically have the time as at that point you'd be an adult, right? You wouldn't be late in your mid-20s. You may not be wanting to set back into a full-time program. And most of these programs are full-time. They're designed to be full-time. And part-time students typically aren't eligible for the same things, whether it be programs, whether it be financial opportunities, things like that. So be mindful of that, of how if you want to step back into it, it's probably the only thing you can do right now. You may have to really focus your energies. You're not going to have a lot of outside time, which could be hard for someone who's mid-20s to say, I can't work, I just have to do this, or I'm only going to take off small projects to do. But I'm sure there's people out there that do that as well. They figure out how they want to do it or teach. And it really depends on your program. But I would say the majority of especially rigorous programs are going to be a full-time experience. So you have to throw yourself right back in when you come back and say, I really, really want to do this. I have to figure this out and I want to be on track and be done. Go on another cruise or excursion or national tour.
Yeah. Do you wish you had that focused, personal touch to pinpoint your exact trouble spots in your dance routine? Learn to unlock your waiting potential and rise above the competition with your own dynamic dance stylist. Why waste hours and days practicing without a step-by-step strategy? In an action-packed plan created specifically for you, you'll see great improvements in just the first week. Fire up the fierce dancer inside with our detailed yet focused program where you can attain results that usually take dancers months. Click the link in the description or email Brittany at instadancecoach@gmail.com to apply. That's instadancecoach@gmail.com. Yeah, okay, I'm asking you a lot of hypotheticals right now, so I think I should take a step back. Let's talk for 18-year-olds trying to get into college. Where do we begin? What would you say step one or something to start thinking about?
That's a good question. And I kind of touched upon it before. And I do some of this for classes that I teach, whether it's for a competition or I've done it here for local theaters. I always talk about your community. So in dance, your community, especially as 18 and 19-year-olds, like that's who you go to, whether it's someone who just graduated from your studio, someone you learned from, someone you met at a convention. Start there. Where are those people looking at? Where did they go? What did they like? What didn't they like? Because ultimately that's a good through line for you. Okay, I want to be a teacher or I want to be a dancer. Let me ask my teacher who is a dancer. That's the first one. I think the second one is really go out there and maybe look at some of these lists. What are some of the best programs for what I want to do? Take from that list and really look at the degree program. That's what's ultimately going to make the difference between these programs that are very similar. You can see like, okay, this one's way too heavy on liberal arts. I'm not interested in that. This one has an internship requirement. I do want to do that. This one would allow me to teach, or there's a pedagogy portion of it, get certified as a teacher. So really look at the programs. I think that's something that people often miss out on. And then I think the next step is to start to prepare yourself to actually go to these different programs, whether it's an open house, whether it's a virtual open house, whether it's just reading their materials. So you're a little bit prepared on how they talk, on what the types of things they stress in all of their marketing, because that'll show you what kind of program it is too. The next step is definitely to look at their audition requirements, which I'm sure we can talk all day about, but that's a huge portion of it too, whether it's an video audition, which it probably will be for the time being, whether they do pre-screening auditions, whether they do unified auditions or regional auditions. That's a whole other portion of this. And that's how you physically audition for the school. And there's lots of different ways to do that. That's the start of it. And then I think ultimately you will get feedback, right? You either get in, you get deferred, you get denied. you get some feedback from that. But I think you've done your homework enough to realize, what do I really want out of this? What am I looking for? Where are some people that have done this before me? In my experience, typically, this is a new process for a lot of people. Many people have applied to college, but performing arts colleges are a whole other situation.
Yeah.
And for most people, they're the only ones in their family doing it. So you don't have a family of like 10 dancers and you're like, oh, I got this. I know how to do this. Usually the whole family is involved figuring out how to do this. And, oh, well, this program asked for this type of an audition and this program wants this type. Pay attention to that too, to really look at what the audition requirements are. Do you fulfill them? Can you fulfill them right now? And then I think also just have fun. Like, I know that sounds really trite, but have fun. A lot of this is really nervousness. There's a lot of nervousness around this, but I think colleges are ultimately looking for people that have let that pass, right? Like, now you're here, you're really doing the thing. We want to see that you can really get your education too, that you've thought about your education. You're ready to start working on this. It's not a typical degree pursuit. So you do need people who are very motivated. Yeah. And I think doing all of those steps and doing all your research shows that motivation as well.
When would you say is a good time to start doing that research? Like sophomore year, junior year, July of your senior year? Like realistically?
I think maybe sophomore year, like you were saying, like sophomore year. And then if you wanted to do, because it's also a good time to do like an intensive, if you wanted to go study at one of these colleges, there's so many pre-college programs, we were just talking about it, that people can go kind of get a taste of some of these programs before they go. So you might want to do that your sophomore year. You might have to just wait till junior year based on your time frame, or like some of these programs have a grade requirement. But I think if you start looking sophomore year, you can start to really ask questions of different places. You can spend some time, take some notes. If you go visit a college, take some notes as soon as you go. What are some feelings you had while you were there? What are some questions that you had while you were there? What are some things you really liked, didn't like? And start to collect that as you go through your college experience. Because then you can look back, even when you're writing your admissions essay, you can make it specific. Well, I visited your school and I really liked XYZ thing about it. It doesn't have to be that way, but it will certainly help to stand out if you've already gone there and done a little bit of legwork, or even a virtual orientation, a virtual meeting that I'm sure that we'll see in the next few years. Attended this virtual open house, and I loved this aspect. That will really help. So I think you're right around like sophomore year, because then junior year is usually an overload for a lot of people academically, taking a lot of standardized testing. You're kind of looking forward towards senior year, and a lot of the stuff you'll see is very similar year to year, the same audition dates, the same kind of audition locations. So a lot of those you can kind of bank on, but I think you're right around looking ahead, starting around your sophomore year. So you can plan ahead if you want to attend an intensive, if your grades could be better, I'll put it that way. If your grades could be a little bit more solid, or even if there's places that you're, wobbling a little bit, or I want a little bit more consistency in my math grade, let's say, it'll help you realize those things for the next 2 years. All right, they have a GPA requirement of 3.2. That means I need to bring up my history lesson, my history grade a little bit, things like that. But I think you're right. And also you have to realize that most people applying to colleges they'll only have up into their transcript for the first half of their senior year. Sometimes you may not even have it by the time if you do like ED, early decision or early action. So you need to make sure that your grades for junior year are solid, good to go. And then when you get your transcript, your senior year, hopefully it may or may not, just depending on when you apply, you may or may not have grades yet. You can use senior year a little bit if you're really doing something high level AP classes, like you were saying, college readiness classes or dual enrollment. Most schools are not going to always see those grades, especially depending on your school district. You may not have them ready until like the end of December. You've already applied for early decision or early action. So junior year is really important academically. It is, absolutely. And I think in my BFA program, it was the most difficult academically. It was just so much, you're building upon it, everything. And then even in the work I do now, we try to not, I don't want to say leave the seniors alone, but we know that they're applying places. They are busy doing, much more kind of specific things for their own education. We're not going to overload them with tons of opportunities or tons of additional classes, but definitely junior year is important. Do you have any advice on that college essay? I feel like that's a pretty stressful part because you have to really put yourself out on paper and grammatically correct. So do you have any tips on that? Do you do any work with the admissions essays? So I don't work in undergraduate admissions here at Penn, but we do require written personal statements from our applicants. One is really general, and it's around Like, does your transcript really accurately capture your experience in high school? Which I really like that question, because some people say, yes, I'm a student through and through, and I've spent all my time doing this and my grades reflect that. And some say, no, like, I know that I didn't do well here and I needed to work a little bit harder in my math class. And so I did. So they're all going to be different. Yeah, it is interesting, because I think it gives students a way to kind of talk up themselves a little bit.
Yeah.
And then the second one is just around extracurriculars. But I think most of the writing done in like college essays in general can, in a lot of ways, they can only benefit you, right? If there's a question on your application or your grades, or if you switch schools or something, use it to write about that. You say, like, I know my grades weren't great my sophomore year. I wanted to bring them up. It's okay if you kind of reference yourself. We're looking for that self-awareness, I think. And in most places, it's not a deny. I don't think many places would deny you based off of the statement. It's only going to help you, unless and watch out, because some of them may be very specific. Like, why does this program meet your educational goals? And in that case, you have to go do your homework. Yeah. What is this program about? What is the teaching about? How do I relate to it? And certainly, I think this is a place to show off your research as well. Like, if you've done all those steps and really looked at it, and you said, like, I have fallen in love with your program for these 5 reasons, and they're very good reasons, like, that's a great essay. And I think sometimes people will look for that rather than, what $30 word did you use? Right. I think sometimes it's more of, especially for what we're talking about, dance and theater.
Yeah. Getting to know the person.
Way more, yeah, about getting to know the person rather than, are they good? The writing skills we understand can fluctuate, especially between artists. So I think it's a good time to show your research, show what you've done. If you have any former experience with the program or with the college, definitely include that. And I think it's also a time, I think students don't realize, like, it's not graded. Right. Like, we're not
at that point, everything's graded. Yeah.
Right. Like, nothing's graded on your application. Like, it is a time for you to really express yourself. If you have a really strong statement, if you have something that really, made your experience at this college or made you want to apply, bring that forward, because most of them will be kind of general and then some will be very specific. So pay attention to those.
Nowadays, everybody is so intense about their community service hours. I have to do my community service hours to get into college. Right. That's how the statement often goes. Of course, not always. Is that something in what you see? Do you see these community service hours really help students get into college? Is that certain schools more than others?
Some schools will have community service as part of their own ethos. We give back to the community in these ways, or this program specifically, especially if it's probably like dance education based, you may have like a whole kind of mission statement on it that they're asking you to kind of reflect upon. I think extracurriculars in general can only help you. If you were, first clarinet, or no, that's not a good example. If you joined the band, right, your freshman year, and then by senior year, you were the section leader of your section, like that growth. Well, that's not an extracurricular. It could be. It is. So it can be, or the outside of it, parts of it can be. I'm just using that as an example. But some of those are classic. Anyway, it depends on where you go to high school. Right. But it's an example of, like, music has been, let's use that person, right? Music has been my like dream, or I've really enjoyed playing it at my concert band. I moved up. I've stayed with this for a while, and I stuck with it, and I did a good job. I think, to me, that's something I definitely look for. Is I started my chess club and now I'm the president of it, or I started this thing in freshman year and I'm grown all the way through it. Because I think a lot of, you can join a lot of clubs. It doesn't mean you really intake them, or you really are
stuck with it and was dedicated.
You haven't dedicated. Yeah, right. Versus some of the things that, we do in high school that are like, oh, I loved doing this, but it wasn't curricular. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people are, especially applying for these majors, are very similar. Like, I had like okay grades, but I had done every show and I had really put myself forward with the drama club and with our theater group. And I wrote about that. It wasn't necessarily something I did for a grade, but I wrote about it. And extracurriculars, I think, especially community service, can only help you really, unless there's this really specific requirement about it, whether it's the college or whether it's the program that you're going to. And certainly, I think I've read a lot of really great ones where I'm like, wow, this is incredible. So again, it can only help you. It's your personal experience that you've created, rather than what we should tell you is what you should have done before you got here.
Sure.
So that can only help you, I think, as your extracurriculars. And if you happen to have gone with them for a few years, highlight that for sure.
a big difference between a BA and a BFA program, obviously. And I feel like the BFA used to be the thing you strived for, and maybe it still is for like people, but I've been hearing a lot more that that students are wanting to double major more and maybe go for that BA so that they can have other opportunities. Do you see that? Do you hear that? And can you give us some insight on that?
Majorly. That is a major component of what's going on in this industry right now. There's more generalized programs that are looking for this, more generalized either public program, I should say like public colleges or large colleges that want musical theater programs or want dance programs because of how specific they are. And there's huge interest right now. So they're looking to get more conservatory-like. And then the opposite is true of conservatory-like programs. A lot of them are looking at how can we have collaboration be part of our program? How can we you have to take something outside of your major, or you can, or at another college. I think it's, again, another one of those things where students have to really look at, and students and parents have to really look at what they're hoping to get out of their education. A minor, even declaring a minor, won't always land you a job. It might just be that you took a lot of business classes that you fit into your schedule. So I think as a performing arts student, it's really important to realize like your time, you're not going to have abundant time all the time to take courses outside of your major. So if you want a minor, if you want something like that, go after it. But I think also realize that not every class will become a minor, right? And that's something to remember, that most employers, most people, especially in audition setting, are not going to look at your minor. Okay. It may be just for you. And also people don't realize that declaring a minor means you have to meet a certain number of credits in that, or even sometimes you have to meet several of them, right? If it's something that's accounting 101, 102, 103, 104, and that's the minor. That means you're using at least 4 classes in that minor. So you have to be really sure whether, it could be education, which would be really useful, or business, which would be really useful, but be mindful that your extra times, your extracurriculars or your electives are going to be used for this minor, for something that you may not use. And so I think, and especially in BA programs, that's kind of a selling point, is that you have this a little bit lighter of a load, but more varied. And you can kind of insert classes a little bit easier than a BFA. BFA, typically, like the load is pretty heavy to start with, and it lightens as you go through like junior, senior year. It lightens just a little bit because they think that you're getting ready for a career and auditioning and things like that. That's a tough question. And I think it's so specific to every program that you look at this is a good point. This is a good point to ask a current student. Okay. Say, I see that or could I speak to a current student if you get admitted? Can I speak to a current student about this? Because they might have great insight that we would never know, right? I'm a higher level administration, like I may not know about this person who's doing exactly what you're talking about. And sometimes that's the best selling point, and someone can really walk you through it. I did this, I don't know if I would recommend it, or I did it and I loved it and I think everyone should do it.
How about getting out of school? If you're in an audition situation, does someone look at the paper and say, oh, BA or BFA? How much does that matter behind the table? Because you mentioned the minor probably doesn't matter too much.
In that setting, the minor if you were auditioning and they wanted you to also write some songs or to teach a little bit on the side, and you had a minor of one of those things, songwriting or education, like you're a shoo-in, right? You're a shoo-in. And some places are like that. If you do like a children's national tour or like children's theater, like they want you to teach, they want you to be able to do a little bit of the creative process yourself. Or, they may want someone who can do a little bit of both. Or
sometimes
you may just want to
make the costumes, make the sets.
Sometimes. Yeah. So sometimes, but that's a good, and we all know stories. We all know stories of people where that happened. Oh, I see this on your resume. Can you really do this? Can you do this for, you know what I mean? Like that natural exchange will happen for people. But I think ultimately it's more important to say, I took 4 years of singing of voice lessons, or I took 4 years of, say, tap. That's way more impressive than I don't know, as an auditioner, the tap minor includes at your school or whatever, right? Or the accounting minor includes at your school. Yeah. So to saying that to me, I don't really have a good reference of it, but to say like, oh, I took 2 years of accounting or general office management, that can help you out like way more. And I think especially starting out as a young performer, you think that that's all they're going to look at is like, what's on my resume? What school? What did I take? Right. But ultimately, it's your audition that does those things for you. And I think school can help, right? School helps you train that level. And I think between BA and BFA, one of the selling points or, kind of pluses for BFAs is that that sense of rigor is there, that you've only done these couple things for 4 years. You've really spent a lot of time in the studio, figuring out your practical, figuring out if you have to do a thesis project, all of those things that you've spent time doing them. I think that's probably the one time that like a BFA versus a BA would really kind of swing in your favor. And also the idea of stamina, just that you're dancing every single day in a BFA program, and a BA program is a little bit more general. There's not such a cut and dry curriculum like that.
Okay. Here's going to be probably a weird, tricky question. So let's say I'm a college student. I get into I want a BFA. I get into my dream school, but the BA, I don't get into the BFA. And I get into another school that's pretty nice, not my dream school, but I get into the BFA. Do you have any advice there of how to weigh that out? I mean, that's like really hypothetical, just playing games here.
But I feel like that's a lot. That's a lot of people is like, I can go to, and I think I even heard it on one of your shows of like going to a BA program, and it's a more general course of study, but I got into in-state tuition and it's like half price of a BFA.
That's true.
And like, okay, when am I really going to be happy here? Am I really going to like it versus something that I want to go towards? I think that question there is really based on looking at maybe some of the things you want to get out of your experience. If you're thinking, I want to perform in a winter concert and a summer concert and do some teaching and this and that, you may want to go for the BFA program because those things are kind of in set. Those things are part of the curriculum.
But you'll have more teaching and more performing opportunities.
It's very likely that you will,
okay.
Or they're built into your program. They're meant to be part of your program. So if you're like, I want to keep on doing that, I want to continue to work towards a professional level of dance or theater, definitely a BFA. And a BA, I think, would help you in that circumstance. If you wanted to say a little bit more general, there might be performance opportunities. They may be fewer and far between. There's also probably like a thesis project with the BFA, or some sort of project or some sort of culmination that you may want, whether it's a showcase, whether it's just an exhibit of your senior work, whether it's an actual performance. Typically, that's not the same with BA programs. They are a little bit more general. You take the class, maybe if you want to build up through the class, sure. But I think it's also the opportunities available to you when you get there. Like, what is the career readiness like you're kind of talking about? What's the career readiness going to look like for both of these places? Probably in the BFA, they're really going to sell their cohort, or at least try to. And BA, it's not. It's meant to be more general. Cool. So you can do a little bit more. Yeah, hopefully that answers your question, these hypotheticals. Yeah. I
know. Okay, so this year with everything going virtual, what's changed, at least in what you do, and what tips do we need to know in order to not look like an idiot with our online submissions?
That's a good question. I think some of the biggest things that have changed are obviously just like interpersonal connection, which is kind of what the arts are about a little bit. So trying to get beyond that. But I think the kind of positive thing that we're all seeing is that we can all collaborate on something globally, because there's no, like, time is very, very relative right now. Right. So people from anywhere we can have this conversation right now because of what's going on. I think it's important to definitely get a good setup, a good handle of technology, a good setup of if you have to record anything for your auditions or pre-screens. And I would definitely recommend, I don't know how many schools are doing it, but pre-screens. If you can do a pre-screen audition where you show 3/4 of your audition, half of your audition, and then they tell you whether or not you would get to the callback, that is probably one of your best friends in the next few years, because it saves you the hassle of having to physically go somewhere. And similarly, if there's any type of open house, an Instagram live, even if you just want to write to one of the people that work in the program and say, like, I'm admitted and I'm super interested in coming. Can I talk to on the phone? Can I Zoom chat with a current student or the head of this program? More than likely, they're going to allow that. Everyone kind of understands what's going on. We've all kind of been working remotely for the last few months. So I think recruitment is growing alongside of that. I've seen some virtual open houses, some virtual recruitment events. So that is very much where we're headed, at least for now. So definitely be mindful of those things. And then I think the other portion of it is, don't forget that it's creative, right? So the arts are creative. As much as we're doing all the screen time, you still have to get up and practice it. Whether it's just recording a video for your friends. Can you come watch this? Let me do something at this local studio that I used to go to. Stay active in that sense too, because I think that's going to be a huge one. It's when it's helpful, right? That's what we're doing. We want to be creative and active. Right. And two, I think that's the one thing missing from all the screen time is like the actual practical of it.
Do you have any bits of advice that maybe we haven't got to?
I think the biggest one for me is, if you can, and most schools will allow you, is if you take a tour, especially if you're admitted, take advantage of every opportunity. A lot of what comes down to decision making is how you're treated by these schools, is their own efforts. It'll teach you a lot about what these schools are looking for and also how they are going to treat you for 4 years. I always say that for me, even though it was very competitive to get into my program, that was the easiest part. Staying there was much harder, to actually motivate yourself every day to see what was available to you. I lived really close in the dorm, so that was really helpful. All those little nitty gritty things are actually the deciding factors here.
Sure.
Talk to someone who's gone through it. Talk to someone who's at the program right now. Talk to the potential program director if you can, and certainly attend any open houses or admitted students days that they have. It'll also connect you to people who are looking at the same things that you're looking at. They're gotten in, and they might be your classmate. That's one of the major decider factors that people forget. Once you get in, it doesn't, that's when you start to decide. That's the starting point of your college career. So I think that, and then also check in with yourself. If you're not enjoying your college, figure out it's just something you can handle, or if it's something that you don't want to do. Your education at this point is yours. So you get to do with it what you want.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
That's all I have for you today, Max. That was great. Really great information. I think that's going to be really helpful for everybody.
Yeah. But I think it's all the questions that we hear all the time. It's like, I want to minor in everything. And you're like, I could see why, right? But it's more about the experience. I think anyone who has a degree will say it's more about what you did than the title per se.
Well, thanks so much, Max. It was wonderful having you on the show, and I'll talk to you soon.
Let's talk soon. Have a great day. Thank you.
Thanks, you too. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Dance, Colleges, and Careers, brought to you by Instadance. This episode is edited by Braden Grubb and myself, Brittany Noltmeyer. Theme song is created by Matthew Claiborne at Flamingo Sound and Show. And thank you to my sponsors, the Chiropractic Center of Leesburg and Claremont in Florida, and Pure Hemp Labs. Catch you on the inside.